There's another aspect to this, a kind of a bigger aspect. And that's when you stop self-identifying the I with the labels of a human life, a very brief human life. I am a man, I'm a woman, I'm this religion, this race, this sexuality, that sexuality. And you realize that they're just brief experiences for consciousness, which is eternal, which is infinite, which is forever exploring, well, forever. And you start to play the long game in the sense that you don't feel the need to go into a sprint from A to B, from the womb to the grave, in a gotta, where, got to do this, got to do that, got to do the other. And you don't either see a human life as a thing in itself, but as just one brief experience in an infinite experience. And when you're coming from the fact that I am the consciousness having the experience, I'm not the experience itself. That's what I'm having. That's what the labels are. Then lots of things change. For instance, go back to the same thing. What people think about you and say about you or whatever pales into insignificance because they are commenting, perceiving on a tiny little fragment of a tiny little experience called a human life. You don't become intimidated by authority, for instance, because you're playing the long game. Whatever happens, it's just an experience, and there'll be another one along in a minute. So instead of saying, okay, this is what I believe I need to do, this is what I believe is right to do, but hold on a minute, what are the consequences for me of doing it? Because once you ask that question, your 5 sense mind will start listing all the reasons why you shouldn't do it. But if you're coming from the big picture and you realize that this is just a brief experience called human, then what you do is you do what you know to be right and what you feel to be right, and you don't go through the process of, yeah, but what are the consequences for me? Because to ask that question, what are the consequences for me, is to contemplate not doing what you know to be right. So I'm not saying you walk in front of a bus or a truck and, I don't care about the consequences. No, I mean, you know what the consequences are if you do that. I'm talking about the consequences for doing what you know to be right, for speaking what you know to be right. Because once you start going into the realm of, yeah, but what will happen if I do? Then you're going to convince yourself most of the time that you shouldn't do what you know to be right. And there's so many people around the world now with this COVID crap going on that know that they should speak out. People in the medical profession, people in other areas, they know they should speak out. And they know they should not acquiesce with their own enslavement. But they do it because they've gone through the list. What are the consequences for me of doing it? And so it's a massive, massive prison for people to live in, and it is a prison because vast numbers of the members of the human race are currently in a situation of tyranny when there's billions of them and a handful ultimately of those that are driving the tyranny. And it's because instead of this is what I know I should do, it's but what are the consequences of doing it?
So there is a deliberate effort from the powers that be that are keeping the truth, which is that we are infinite consciousness, having this subjective experience in our bodies forever, essentially. They're keeping that truth from us. Is like there is this that like would you say all the conspiracies, quote unquote, lead to that one, like the ultimate truth of infinite consciousness?
That's the foundation of it. You imagine trying to manipulate and impose your will, when, especially when there's comparatively, well, more than comparatively, when you're a tiny number and that which you are targeting is a massive number, then imagine if that massive number was all aware that it is a point of attention in an infinite flow of consciousness, and that the perception that that point of attention has dictates what experience follows, what we call cause and effect, I suppose. Imagine that. You imagine if you had billions of people who were doing what they knew to be right and not being imprisoned by fear of the consequences, then that would be an impossible group of people to manipulate. Impossible. What if that group of people knew that although we are points of attention, unique points of attention, and we should celebrate that uniqueness, but ultimately we're all expressions of the same consciousness. And so the divisions of race and religion and sexuality, all of it, it's just illusory. We're divided by our experience, which we perceive to be the I. If you realize we're all the same I, but just different unique expressions of that I, then of course the potential of the few to divide and rule the many, which is essential to any situation where the few control the many, would be gone. So the situation basically is this. You have two worlds in this reality. One world is the world of the general population, and that world has to be kept in a state of limited knowledge, not least about the nature of reality and the nature of the I. And then you've got this other world, which I call the global cult, because it's a network of interconnecting secret societies with ultimately a central leadership, which passes through the generations, through the secret society network. That's why they're secret. These hidden truths of the nature of reality, the nature of the I, and also how our perceptions become our reality, how our perceptions become our experience. So if your perception is that you're little me, you will live a little me life until that perception changes, because it's what happens. If you perceive yourself to be little me, I have no power, you're going to live a very different life, have a series of very different experiences to someone who's aware that they're an expression of all that is, has been, and ever can be. And so, like I say, if you're dealing with billions of people that have that awareness and sense of self, you ain't going to manipulate them, as you will manipulate people who think they're little me, I have no power. And so squeezing the perceptions, the knowledge of the target population is absolutely vital. It can't be done otherwise. And so they control the education system, which is a programming system. They control the media. See, if perceptions become reality, then where do perceptions come from? They come from information received, which we process into a perception. And that perception becomes behavior, and that behavior we call our life, and the collective behavior becomes human society. So this other world knows that if they can control perception through control of information, they will control behavior and thus control human society, which is collective behavior. And that's the dynamic that's going on. So fundamental to this conspiracy is for this reality, secret reality, to keep the target population in a state of ignorance. So if you can get them to believe in a religion, religiously, focus their attention, and anything outside that religious belief system must be wrong, then you put someone in a prison of the mind. Because it's a phrase that is attributed to Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher. Words to the effect of wisdom is knowing how little we know. When you realize that we are, yes, a point of attention, and that attention is focused in a tiny band of frequencies through the decoding processes of the body and the brain, then you are well aware that there's always an enormity more to know than we know. So all the time, when you realize that, you're light on your feet, going where the information takes you. You've not got limitations of belief that say, I can't go there because it's outside my religious belief system. What will the Pope think? What will the Imam think? Whatever. You go where the information takes you, because you know that wisdom is knowing how little we know. And given we know so little in the situation we're in, then obviously there's more to know than we think we know. And when anyone kind of concludes that they know what they need to know and all there is to know and all that stuff, then they're in a prison, because the one thing you know, there's always more to know than you think you know. So if you take a religious belief system and you focus upon it at the exclusion of all other possibility, because you go into that other possibility and you're breaking the belief system of the religion, so you can't do that, then you're in a prison of the mind. You're in a prison of the mind in the same way if you go down the road of this world is all there is, and life's a bitch and then you die, and that's all there is. That's a prison of the mind, because it is saying there is one possibility when we are living in an infinite possibility. I mean, when we use the phrase, all that is, has been, and ever can be, what that simply means is all potential. Anything's possible. And if you break it down, one of the great prisons of the mind, and this cult knows that, is to limit and squeeze humanity's sense of the possible. Because once you do that, then so many things are happening, including things being done by this cult, that you dismiss as not possible, because in your reality, it's not possible. But in reality, it is possible. And not only is it possible, it's being done. So putting people in these little boxes of sense of the possible is very, 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 very important to this cult. And if you limit your sense of the possible, your sense of what is possible, you limit your sense of your own possibility. So, for instance, if you see the world as solid and physical, then you'll look at how things could be changed, and you'll think it has to be grindingly slow. You have to do physical things to change it. So you have to have a meeting, a committee, someone take the minutes, and so on. And your sense of the possible will be incredibly limited by the sense of a physical, solid world. But if you realize that actually this solidity is illusory, that what we see as solidity is actually holographic, and that the holographic is a if you like, a three-dimensional expression of an information field, then suddenly if the information field changes, then the holographic expression of it must change. And that can happen very fast. It doesn't have to happen slowly. And where I'm going with this is again, the same dynamic. Perception creates reality. Perception creates experience. So when you're looking at it at that level, my perception becomes my experience, collective perception becomes collective experience. Then instead of changing, even on a massive scale, being slow, laborious, and grinding, it can change in an instant. Because what we call human society, the way it plays out, everything, is simply a collective version of collective human perception. Collective human perception changes, then its expression must change. The world will change. Say we all decided to see each other as different expressions of the same consciousness. Say we all decided, perceived, to love each other and to see that the divisions between us are illusions, just to give us a certain experience. It's not real. I mean, it's not who we are. Like, suddenly, vast numbers of people start having that perception and that interaction with each other. Well, what's going to change? The world's going to transform.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is what happens when you limit information. You get people to believe that something's not possible, like, meaningful change, when actually it is possible, but only if you know how the world is being created second by second by our own perception. So what happens is that our perceptions become our experience, and the cult knows that. So if it knows that if it can manipulate our perception, it will dictate our experience, our behavior. And if it can do it on a big enough scale, it will dictate the nature of human society. So if you look at this COVID stuff from the start of 2020, people in the spring of 2020 went under house arrest meekly, mildly, because they perceived, information received, that there was a deadly virus. And they perceived that the people in charge cared about them. Bit of a joke, but they again, many believe it. And so therefore, when people in charge said, oh, you need to go under house arrest, lockdown, to protect you and your family from this deadly virus, well, that they did. So they went into that situation, which has devastated the lives of so many people, not least people with businesses and employment. They did that because of their perception that there was a deadly virus. Then there's another group that was questioning this. Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I believe all this. But they went under house arrest because they asked the question, yeah, but what are the consequences for me if I challenge this, if I don't acquiesce to it? And so they went under house arrest. And that left a small number, relatively small number, very small number, that could see it and weren't having it either. Those three perceptions, particularly the first two perceptions, were how a handful of people, ultimately at the core, put billions under house arrest without really a murmur at that time, the first one in the spring. Because they control perception. This is why they control the media. This is why they control the education system. This is why they control Silicon Valley, because these are the sources of information that become human perception.